Hello and welcome to the Story Games Sojourn. We got a little bit of a bonus episode today in which I'll be discussing the design of an upcoming supplement that I put together called Mythic Denizens for Mythic Bastionland. So this is going to be me walking through all of the different elements of this particular supplement and just to get some of my thoughts down up and around why this thing exists, what some of the influences were, and then pitch to you the idea that you should include this in your game. This is just something that I know Chris McDowell has done for his project for Mythic Bastionland and others, and I see the appeal because there is a terseness, a concision to his writing, and adding a lot of color up and around what went into these different myths, went into these different characters, these knights can be kind of fun to do. So it's something I would like to do today. So if you have not heard of Mythic Bastionland, it is a game about playing knights who gallivant around and seek the myths. So these are do-gooder characters, and the players then go through these different plots, these thread lines that all kind of interweave together. And the GM is given these six myths to be placed around the realm. And so as characters move through the hexes, they are rolling to determine what omens they encounter. Do they encounter something from a nearby myth or from a random myth? Or do they just encounter the landscape, the landmarks, as they move from place to place? That's essentially the pitch for it. You have knights that are gaining glory by protecting the realm, seeking the myths, and honoring the seers, right? And so there is one kind of interesting spot to be put in a little more character, a little more individual plot threads. And so that was a little bit of the purpose behind this supplement, this Mythic Denizens. One other thing I'll mention before diving into these denizens that if you haven't seen, there's a Quinn's Quest review, which is a RPG YouTube channel that reviews different games. There Quinn's Quest then goes through Mythic Bastionland in particular as was one of the products, and talks about it as a game and does a fantastic job about an hour's worth of rambling and just wonderful stuff. If you haven't seen it, I suggest you do so and kind of look at it. So if you are familiar with Mythic Bastionland, then everything I just told you, you already know about. So let's get into kind of what this is. I'll also say that this is a pitch for you to pick this up on itch, but it is also I'm going to be reading through essentially everything that is currently in the supplement. So if you listen to this and you're like, okay, sounds great, I'm going to take the ghost of the idea that Sam just mentioned, and I'm going to put it into my game, and I'm going to write up my own denizens. Fantastic. The whole idea is I just wanted to talk through these characters and what they do, and this is more for me than for you. No. This is I think this is just fun. Um this is also, I should say, where they are currently. So this is even before release that I'm talking about these. So if there is something that I mention here, and it becomes apocryphal because I change something up, or a character gets axed, which I highly doubt would happen, this is merely a snapshot of what they look like as they stand now. Maybe my editor gets back to me and says, you know what, actually, we got to change a few things around, in which case we'll do that. So if I'm speaking out of turn here, it is only because this is how they are now, and I can speak to the original intent, though some things may change around. One thing that can change around, one thing that is pretty important to me as this project kind of moves along, is that this can evolve. So currently there are 12 denizens, and I would hope to someday, based on the success of this project, continue to implement more denizens. And then as early supporters can enjoy those as they release, and then people are able to give feedback, and we can continue adding these pieces to our game. So, what is this? So Mythic Denizens are characters that go around the map of the realm. So I'm gonna read through just a little bit of the rules, the how to actually input this into your game, and the kind of the fulcrum of this is the wilderness role. Okay. So to use these roles with Mythic Bastionland, replace the wilderness role table, which is found on page 18, with this one below. So if you've run this game for any amount of time, you're familiar with this. So on a 1 tells you to find a random myth and to see the next omen. On a 2 to 3, you then find the nearest myth and do the next omen, and the players will encounter that. Then on a 4, 5, or 6, you encounter the next landmark. Otherwise, it's just an empty hex, right? When you're moving from spot to spot. But what this supplement does is it changes those counts from 4 to 6 to just 4 to 5. And then when you roll a 6 on the wilderness roll, you encounter the next omen from a random denizen in this realm. So denizens are wandering characters that have no fixed place in the realm, and their omens are encountered in order. But you still have to keep in mind the primacy of action, because these denizen myths are contingent on usually a singular character. If that character dies or something happens to them, or they're detained somehow, obviously you can't go through with their continued omens as they read on the table. You're gonna have to continue to play to find out what happens next. So this goes part and parcel with creating a realm, which is found on page 14 of your copy. So you can choose or roll 3 denizens to add to the realm. So I'm going to list out what they are right here. Perhaps this is just a snapshot that will be changed in the future. So we have the oath. Sorry, not the oath. The oaf. We have the oaf. We have the ranger, merchant, minstrel, paladin, and pyromancer. Those are your first 6. Then you have the Revenger, the Patrician, the Pilgrim, the Sword, the Cursed, and the Giantess. All right. So, and then the credits credit myself and Gustave Doré. Gustave Doré. So littered all throughout this supplement, including the initial the title, splash page. All of this stuff is Gustave Doré, and a person that I've only encountered recently as their actual name. I've encountered their work a lot before, when I was doing my college work and we were reading through Dante's Divine Comedy. Found a lot of his pictures. If you've seen any wood etchings of Bible stories, you've probably seen Gustave Doré, and he's got over. I just looked this up. He has over 100,000 pieces credited to him. So if you're feeling that your creative output is low, you're probably right, because you can't compare to Gustave Doré. Man, when you burn the candle at both ends and you're gonna die before 50, you really push to exceed your limits. You got to get it out quick. So, the first page of Mythic Denizens is the title page, and it has this lovely image. It's kind of a almost gothic horror of a woman who has chopped off the head of the Assyrian warlord, and it's just a fantastic piece. It's lit from beneath, almost as if you were holding a flashlight, from beneath your face, and the light shining up is telling a scary story. It kind of has that look to it. A lot of fun. A lot of fun. Okay, we went over the preface page, which has the rules for how to use these denizens, and so now we'll go to the oath. And I'll probably take a little bit longer on this one just to give the general shape and what these denizens are like. And then we'll speed through as we can get to the content rather than the shape here. So the layout it looks very familiar to people who have read through Mythic Bastionland, the myth page in particular, because we have a image at the top, and it's a Gustave Doré piece from I believe it's Inferno, of a knight laying down, and then the bottom half of this piece of this particular page has all of the omens and the cast and a table or two. So The omens are to be encountered in order. So they usually, for the denizens, have 4 omens. Originally, I wanted to do 6 for each of these, just like the myths found in Mythic Bastionland. But because there's a few reasons why I didn't go with that. Um, we have characters that it's largely dependent on one person. So if that one person dies or you don't particularly like this one character, you're stuck with them for a long time. So I wanted to trim it down a little bit, but it also still has a particular shape to it, where if you only had 3 omens or fewer, it may not. It would just be a 1 note or a 2 note deal. I wanted a little more of a plot with a beginning, middle, twist, and then an end. Usually is how these go. So if you're familiar with your uh, storytelling forms, this is one that's fairly common, kind of a 4-step story. So an introduction, and then kind of an escalation, a twist, and then a conclusion. So let's look at this one. So this is the oaf. So the first one is the oaf is dozing in his armor. He lost his greatsword, which is obviously and comedically nearby. He gives a small gift to anyone who returns it to him. This is just an initial encounter. This is something where you would roll a 6 on the wilderness die, and it'd be pretty easy to do this, to run this encounter. And it gives us kind of an introduction to the oaf character. So if you look at the cast, the top billing, I should say, of each of these denizens is always the denizens themselves. So this is the oaf, the radish knight, known as Orlado, and it gives all his stats there and tells you a bit of his behavior. So in this case, we have a behavior in which he switches from a great sword to only a shield when overwhelmed. So this is a character who's a bit of a coward, and from the first omen, a bit of a doof. Omen number 2, an escalation here. The oaf sits just outside a gathering of 4 unaware bone soldiers. He is determined to fight the unholy creatures, but cannot formulate a plan, so he sits, hoping to think of something. He gives a small gift to anyone who helps. So we can see a theme here of this guy not understanding, not knowing what to do. He's very unwise. And also, this is the second time we've received a small gift. So if you go to the bottom right of the page, it shows you the small gifts and the item, the form it can have, from like a tendril moss to a coarse powder, and then the effect. So it could remove fatigue, it could repair a weapon, it can poison your enemies, right? And it gives a little bit of flavor with some of the items involved there. Number 3 is the twist. So the armored daughter of the oaf approaches with a warm demeanor. She is embarrassed about his exploits, but clearly affectionate towards him. She gives a small gift to anyone who helps. So the twist is that this guy, for being uh, not that bright and for being the oaf that he is, has someone who cares about him. So you can encounter this particular person, even if, the oaf, through that encounter, the previous encounter with the unaware bone soldiers, has perished. You could still encounter omen number 3, and it's something that the players can um, push up against. It's something for them to them encounter. And then we have number 4. The oaf is overwhelmed by 8 giant mosquitoes in a slick, muddy clearing. If he survives, roll below. This is, I think, I do this one other time here, but there is a reaction table that follows the luck table look to it. So on a 1, the oaf is depressed. He stays put and mopes. He discards a small item and his great sword. So because we have him being overwhelmed when he's fighting the 8 giant mosquitoes, if you look at his character, he switches to just using the shield. And if he, after he survives, is depressed, he will discard this great sword. And then 2 to 3, he's hopeful, so he has to join the company for 3 days to learn of their wisdom. And on a 4 to 6, he's transformed. He's off to find his daughter, gives up his shield and a small gift. So it's almost as though he comes into his own and has learned some wisdom, which is to be with his daughter, which I think is just quite cute. And then on the cast, we have the young radish knight, Orlena, and we have the bone warriors and the giant mosquito. So All of these are things that are found on the cast page, and I think they're just kind of fun to put together. So, when you have your virtues, it's something that you don't tend to put tens across the board. You don't want to say that all the virtues are the same. You give a little bit of variation. It kind of keys you off to what kind of characters these are. So, a character whose highest stat is vigor tells you there's a physical, very brawny character. And like the radish knight, the oaf, who has the lowest stat being clarity, tells you a little bit about the kind of person they are. When your spirit is higher than your clarity, that tells you something, right? Guard is interesting to me because it's a way to convey experience. It's also a way to convey dexterousness in a way that's not quite the same with clarity. If you're familiar with the grandfather of this particular game, Into the Odd, you have strength, dex, and will, and so it's really easy to say, "Oh, this is a high dex character. They move very fast." Whereas here in Mythic Bastionland, because we have clarity, that's more of a mental stat and has to do with reaction. We can have some overlap there, but when you have very fast characters like the giant mosquitoes, the blood flies, you can have more guard because they are flying characters and they are able to get out of the way uh, and not take hits. So that's one thing you can convey with guard. I also like that the weapons in Mythic Bastionland are just more interesting because they have more dice, and you can get a lot more variation. So a 2d10 greatsword that's long feels very different than someone who uses two short swords. In which case, I think you'd be rolling 4d6 if I'm not mistaken. And so you have a character who can do a lot of gambits, and they can use those dice to bolster and affect their other attacks. Or you can have a greatsword, which is very swingy. Um, well, it has two dice, right? So there's a little bit of a bell curve there, but as far as the amount of damage you can do is very high just by rolling on a greatsword. And I also love the shields. I think they're very fun to include. So, like, our bone warriors have a club and a shield. So, by having a weapon in each hand, they're each rolling two dice. And you can then obviously tell when a club does the most damage versus when they predominantly use their shield, which I just think is very fun and is something that Mythic Bastionland does very well. One thing that I do like about this particular denizen is that the final encounter, because it is the final, I like that we can point out if he survives, because there are 8 of these giant mosquitoes, and they have a particular attack of using a stinger. So they roll a d6 and they ignore armor, which is great for them against the oaf because he has 4 armor from his plate, coat, helm, and shield. So he's a very robust character and can defend against a lot, except for these particular mosquitoes who ignore his armor altogether and can wedge themselves, I guess, between the shoulder blades, between all of the plate armor, and sap him away. So this is an encounter that I want to be a little more difficult, and eight of these mosquitoes could be quite a lot, especially if you don't have any blast damage. So that's something that the oaf doesn't have. One thing about the oaf that I think is worth pointing out, I was in discussion with a buddy of mine, Boss Jabba was his handle, and we were talking about how some of these myths can be kind of railroady, and that they have you go down this set path, and sometimes you are given choices, you're given very clear ways to intervene, and other times it's just something happens. And at the very worst, something bad happens to you, or something good happens to you. It can feel kind of arbitrary. For a lot of these denizens, you may find there is kind of an intention for it, almost like a train going by. So people can be going about their daily lives and adventuring around just like you are, but there is not a direct action to take, or a the entire play stops and they turn to you and say, "What do you do?" Sometimes these things can just happen, And so a train is going by is the analogy that I keep thinking of, because you can get on the train or you can just let it happen. So you can encounter these omens like the oaf, for example, and just see him dozing and leave him there. And then the next time you see him, he's outside of a gathering of 4 bone warriors, and you just leave him. And then you see his daughter and you don't talk to her. And then you see the oaf and he's encountering these 8 giant mosquitoes, and you leave him. It's just something about your character and who you guys are as players if you choose to not interact with these things. But there's no lightning bolt that strikes you if you don't do these things or engage with them. It's just another thread to add to the tapestry is what I keep thinking about. Because you have all these myths, a lot of things going on already, throwing on another piece, another element, I didn't want to just be more of the same. So because a lot of the myths are affecting the realm in big ways, and you have things that change the world, the denizens are much smaller in scope, right? It's one character. It's only 4 omens, and they only take a few extra pieces to go with, and they're not a complete overhaul of the system. All right. So now that I've talked at length about the oath, we can go and talk kind of about influences and a general design philosophy I took towards this. Besides what I had just mentioned about the characters and their scope. So I think I listed the influences. So, Dark Souls is one, because there are characters in there that you encounter almost seemingly at random if it's your first playthrough of the game. There are NPCs that you find, and then you find them again, and then you find them again later. And at each junction, there's something to do, or you just see them. Sometimes there's nothing to do. And one of the almost rules of thumb is the more you like a character, you should probably talk to them less, because there's usually in some Dark Souls fashion a twist of fate, or something bad happens to them if you follow their plotline all the way to the end without intervening. There can be a very sad ending. So the oath, for example, is from a character called Sigmire, who has just a he highlights the competence of the player. I'll put it that way. He's not all that bright, and it's a very easy way to make characters feel cool, and that's kind of what he does by being someone who is immovable and is somebody who sits there outside of a gate and says, "Oh, the gate's closed. I can't do anything about it." Um, that's one of the character ideas I wanted to take over into Mythic Bastionland. There are other characters, and I'll point them out as we go along the way. There is also The Witcher. I wanted some of those character elements as well. There is a particular character, I think is actually the next one, the Ranger, that I wanted to get to, that kind of has some elements there. Over the Garden Wall, I'll mention this one as well. But you have a lot of characters in that mini series who are a product of misunderstanding. And I'll point those out as well. But there are some characters that definitely have a particular plot line that they're following, and they come perpendicular to the characters, or maybe just in parallel. They don't always have a direct, "Hey, I need this help. Please help me," and they come on their knees asking for players to intervene. We also have Andrew Lang's fairy stories as an inspiration, just because there are a lot of woodland plots and characters that are defined by their occupation and defined by a very evocative moniker, I guess. And that's how a lot of fairy stories work. You have the woodsman. What are they? Well, they're the woodsman, right? And we a lot of these characters are defined around the title that the game gives them, even though they have real names and they're people in flesh and blood besides the title that they're given. All right, so that was the first denizen. I'm gonna roll now into the ranger. So the ranger is an influence of, I guess, Ranger's Apprentice, which I've been rereading. Is this young adult fantasy series about rangers who are kind of the sheriffs, but this is an old sheriff, I guess, and also a monster hunter. So going over kind of in broader strokes instead of reading through each thing. So this is a old ranger who marks your map. Every time he encounters you, he greets you, and he lets you know that there is a target out there. So for Omen 1, as an example, he greets the party and then marks a map of the figure of a manticore. And there are specific rules for encountering these figures, but I wanted to kind of introduce these rules that I drafted up and put up on the blog for encountering these figures. So if you're working on an actual physical map, it's cool to put a pawn or a token of some sort on the map itself to represent, hey, this is the manticore. When you move into this space, into this hex, there is a table at the bottom of the Denizen page for figure encounters. And it's just a simple luck table. When you roll a 1, the trail goes cold. So you have to remove the figure from the map and you have to seek guidance. So this is the worst outcome. When you get all the way to the spot where the manticore is, turns out they're not there. If you roll a 2 to 3, the figure is not in this hex, but there is evidence that they're in a random adjacent hex. Roll again when entering that hex. So they're almost, it becomes a chase, right? So you get to where the manticore is, and it actually turns out they're farther away. So what does this do? This delays things. This means that you're burning out time. If you were moving through the afternoon, now it's evening. What are you supposed to do now? Do you have to camp here? Do you have to wait? What does this mean? You have to kind of have a reaction to that, and it changes the circumstances. Or on a 4 to 6, they're simply present. So the figure is there and you encounter them as you would. So it gives a little bit of a chance that not only your information is exactly what the characters say, and so it's a good representation, I think, of the map not being the territory. So the ranger does this 3 times. Um, Unlike the previous denizen, the Omen 3 is not a particular twist. It is actually Omen 4, which I'll tell you about in a minute. But he puts a figure of a manticore, puts a figure of a unicorn, and a figure of a chimera. So I wanted some classic, in this case, all Greek monsters that you can find, and they are detailed under the cast. And one thing that's just kind of fun is that these were just fun to design. So the Manticore feels very different from the Unicorn because the Unicorn, when it causes harm, you reroll all of your virtues as though becoming old, which is a mechanic that I just think is fun from the original game, and then also just gives a very different feel to how you interact with this thing, especially when another ability of the Unicorn is to phase step within eyesight instead of moving. So this thing teleports. And the old ranger, when you encounter him, does mention that the unicorn's wanted alive. And then there's the chimera, which has 3 heads, if you're familiar with the beast, and has different attacks for each of them, which is just very fun to design because you can put all these 3 things together and give them guard. So you kind of have you can disable a particular head. Like if you think that the ram's head is the most deadly, you can take that out first. It has guard to for that. So it's a very complex beast for only having what just the title and then maybe 5 very short lines of what's going on there. So again, props back to Chris's design for being able to make very complex and interesting encounters with just not that much text. It's got a lot of brevity to it. So, what can we do with these figures when you encounter them? There is a special instructions at the top. So all knights who they deliver these figures to the seat of power, and if they do so, they gain 1 glory. So this kind of becomes your monster hunting quests that you can every time you encounter the ranger, he continues to add to the layers here. And again, they're small boss encounters. Which reminds me, on the kind of flavor table in the bottom right, that just kind of adds to the detail. We have a bounty battle. So it gives you a battlefield and a twist. Things like a giant eagle's nest, a scaffolded tower, a barricaded barn, and then a twist could be things like a ravaging fire, or there's a vainglory ranger here who maybe wants to kill steal or take your glory, and or the monster could have a fake death ambush, right? So things to kind of flavor up the particular encounter that you'll have with one of these monsters. And then the twist is actually the final omen in this one. So the ranger greets you, and he's actually mortally wounded. He's hiding beneath a corpse, and he marks the map with the man who killed, or not the man who killed him, but the man who hired his killer, a jealous ranger. So one of the fun things about having limits in terms of the cast, and the number of words that the amount of space you have to work with, is that sometimes you double up. So in this case, the ranger cast member is the person that you encounter. So if you attack him, he has stats for that, I guess. If there's some way that he gets drawn into another conflict, I suppose. So you can use him as that. But then also, he marks the map with a ranger who, if you're just kind of using the denizen as written, the ranger that he points out has also his stats. And so he gets the same virtues, he gets the same equipment, the same armaments, and you go off and you find them and you bring them to justice because they killed a ranger. So that is that is the ranger. Let's move on to the merchant. I wanted an NPC that you could encounter, and just like you might see in Zelda Breath of the Wild, as you might see in a lot of these open world games. I think Elden Ring has a few of these where you walk around and you find somebody who's just randomly selling stuff. This is kind of a fun open world trope. And so the special here is that the merchant is open for deals at each omen. So each time you encounter him, he has stuff for sale. And then we have an expanded flavor table that details all of these deals and shows you essentially what he has for sale at each omen. And it changes every time. So coming up with fun and interesting items is always very just enjoyable to do as a designer, and steal from other games that you've played, other games that you've written, and this is especially emblematic of that. So he's also interested in trades for things like fingers, wings, teeth, and rocks, because he's got to be weird. So the merchant, corpulent and gruff, offers a greeting at Omen 1. He asks for anything of interest. Sorry, he he asks for any interest in his wares, especially a young rooster. So each time you encounter him, he is going to have these unique items, but then he's also going to have a cast member that he is going to put for sale. So he has some animals. So in Omen 1, he has a young rooster. In Omen 2, he has a mature horse. And in Omen 3, the twist, he has an old drake. So he's been trying to sell you items, and these can just be simple barter deals from things that you've encountered along your way. So you've picked up, the skull of a lizard. I don't know, whatever that you have for trade. The merchant kind of deals in that, which just feels very old school. We picked up monster bits, and this guy will trade us for them. So I mentioned the twist. The twist is number 3. He's been selling you these or wanting to sell these animals, and then there is an old drake that he has, and the ill-fed drake attacks on Omen 3. One thing fun about this encounter is that the old drake, whose name is Humdrum, which is very funny to me, has a bite and a claw attack, which are actually hindered by an iron mouthpiece and iron restraints, respectively. So the boss fight gets harder as you go because he has a blast attack in which he's attacking the knights, but then he's also attacking his own restraints. And so when he breaks free of the iron mouthpiece, he then also has a bite that he's using. And then when he breaks free of the iron restraints, he has claws that he's using. And it's a very angry old drake, stews with continuous meats. So maybe you do buy this thing when the fight is over, and you decide not to kill it. In which case, you can feed it continuous meats, I suppose, and can take it with you on your journey. I think it'd be kind of fun, and it seems um, quite difficult to take down. But if you can manage it, then yeah, I suppose that's your reward. And then the fourth encounter, Omen 4, is he apologizes. The merchant apologizes for any damage done and asks for any interest in his wares. Of course, following the primacy of action, if you are doing Omen 3, and when you encounter it and the Drake goes berserk and can even attack the merchant himself, maybe you don't even make it to Omen 4. This is part of the playing to find out what happens. So just because I've outlined, what could happen doesn't mean that that's entirely where we go. Maybe you're cut short. So the merchant, a fun, strange little character. The minstrel. Minstrel is special because he steals your stories, is essentially the pitch. So Omen 1, he approaches you. He's a mandolin player, and a bit of a jester type who approaches with torn clothes and a weary smile. He asks about the deeds of the company and writes down any stories told as true. He promises to spread news of these exploits. So, a couple things fun is that we have stories. I like telling stories within stories. I think it adds to the groundedness. I think it adds to the immersion, and it's something that builds more lore, more myths into the world, especially when one of the primary ways that characters, quote unquote, level up in this game is that they obtain glory from doing these myths. So if you encounter the minstrel far along in your journey, you may have a lot of stories to tell them, or maybe you don't have that many stories early on in your knighting career, and so you just tell him some things that may or may not have happened, or maybe you exaggerate. One of the fun wordings here is that he writes down any stories told as though true and promises to spread news of these exploits. So it's a simple encounter, and I think it's fun to have characters that look up to other characters, or at least ask them about their lives, and are genuinely interested. And for this reason, or for this particular character, their interest is a bit feigned, because you'll see that the minstrel actually profits from the players encountering him. So the minstrel in Omen 2 approaches wearing finery and hails the company, approaches with a large cask of wine to share. So now you've encountered him, and it looks like his circumstances have changed. Once again, he asks about the deeds of the company and writes down any stories as though true, and promises to spread news of the exploits. So then the twist, number Omen 3. So, as written in the special instructions above, Omen 3 is encountered each time the company visits a different holding. So, once you encounter Omen 2, then 3 is the next time you go to a holding, the minstrel is surrounded by a crowd and is finishing a story of the company's exploits, even using material the company never told him. He credits himself with their heroic deeds and roll the audience reaction. So I love this because now this is the minstrel taking credit for everything that the players have done. How dare he? Which may be something that the players themselves would do, the brigands. And he credits himself with everything, and then the audience reaction is a fun element to this too, because just because the minstrel claims that to have done these things, there's a good chance, but it's not guaranteed that he's going to get all of the glory for what's happened. So, audience reaction table, we have the bad, medium, and good results, I suppose. So, on a 1, there are boos and hisses from the audience. The minstrel is chased out of town by an angry crowd. 2 to 3, they have curiosity, so they demand proof of his exploits before giving approval. And then 4 to 6, they're overjoyed. The minstrel is showered with praise and gifts. Then Omen 4 is the final version, the final omen, and encountered when they visit the seat of power. So essentially, it happens again, where the minstrel is taking credit for your stuff, and you have to roll the audience reaction in the seat of power, and that marks the final omen for this denizen. I think it's fun because there's a couple of reactions you can have to him, and just because you tell him some things or tell him nothing at all doesn't mean that he won't continue to do his underhanded dirty work, which he's able to take stories that the company never told him, which I think is fun because then you as the GM can recall some of their events, even if they don't remember what particularly happened that was good or noble, or maybe he stopped. Maybe the minstrel tells a story about how he stopped these knights from doing this terrible thing that they may have actually gotten away with in the actual game itself. Then for the flavor table, we have the audience members. So some of them they're just scattered around the audience. But again, a lot of the emphasis here is on just the minstrel, who is just a good good storyteller. And again, adding to the layers of lore. The Paladin. Paladin is a friendly character. So I wanted someone who could intervene into the lives of the players and be helpful and not just as the minstrel does, backstab them. So the paladin is someone that you can maybe get attached to a little bit. And so he stands erect next to a wild wolf impaled on his spear. He gives an echo scroll, which, when opened, disappears in a ray of light and summons the paladin to assist until the next dawn. He's then off to gain his own glory. So, this is a reference to kind of Dark Souls NPCs in which they have summon signs that appear on the ground. And I think an original version of this, there actually was a explicit reference to summon signs, but I wanted something where you can pull an NPC in and say like, "Hey, we need some help." And who knows when this device can be used, or it is going to be used by the players, because in a moment of desperation, how desperate do they need to get before they call in the paladin? And then of course he's got his stats off to the right. So he has his spear, he has his sunlight shield, and he can deny. So he can use the feat of deny, but he only uses it for allies, which I think is just a quirky, quaint little piece. And along with that, he is helpful, but he also refuses to engage in underhanded actions. He demands a straight fight. So the image from Gustave Doré is that of Don Quixote. So you may hear some familiar rings there where he's off to get his glory. He wants to be a knight, but also his code of chivalry kind of gets in the way. And he's also called the Beaming Knight, and his name is Soren. So he's reminds me of the original intent, the original design behind him was to reference Solaire, if you're familiar with Dark Souls. So like Solaire, he's going to be a character with a kind of dramatic twist and end to him that's fateful. So Omen 2, he kneels at a old altar to a lost sun god. Excuse me. He's eager to hear stories of the company, especially ones involving glory. So just like the minstrel, I wanted there to be an exchange of stories, and for him to have a particular, in this case, just he's not out for a particular benefit. He doesn't have an angle that he's going for. He's just genuinely curious. And the flavor table is an altar with offerings, other offerings that are present there, as well as blessings. So how you use this at your table is largely determined by you. Omen 3, the twist. We are going to see, I guess, bits of the twist that's coming between Omens 3 and 4. So the Paladin fights 3 vampire thralls in an outcropping of tall pillars. He is determined to hunt more vampires after he rests. So now we see bits of vampires, which there are no references, I believe, in the original Mythic Bastionland. So we're introducing the lore of Dracula without explicit permission from the source material. That's all right. Omen 4, the paladin raves about finding his own glory and attacks any living person near him. He loses D6 vigor each turn he is exposed to sunlight, and there are fang marks on his neck. Dun dun dun. Yes. If you're familiar with Dark Souls, the character of Solaire loses his mind while pursuing his own son. So in this case, the paladin going after his glory. And I love the ironic twist of the Beaming Knight being all about sunlight and having a sunlight shield, and then he turns to a vampire because he is now slave to hiding from the sunlight. Fang marks on his neck, which means that there is a vampire lord, and the note beneath Omen 4 is that if this paladin survives Omen 4, he will ambush the company in any hex adjacent to a holding. If in doubt, the vampire lord that turned the paladin is located beneath the seat of power. So hopefully I don't do this too often. I don't think I do. But there is an omen that kind of bleeds over beyond the page, so you don't encounter any more omens from the paladin, but you could find ways for him to continue to harass them if he is not changed back. And there are rules for what happens when the vampire lord is killed. So when killed, the thralls are free from domination. So there is an out here to save the paladin if after he helps you, after you guys share stories together, you found this bond, and you think, I think there's a way to save him. You can do so. And there is the vampire thralls are in the cast listing, but also so is the vampire lord, because I wanted a fun boss fight that you could encounter. There is also no I don't this the supplement doesn't give any guidance for this site that the vampire lord would be at. It just says he's located beneath the seat of power. So if I were doing this in my game, I'd probably do a site and very loosely detail it. But it could be a hidden chamber, a catacomb. You could do a whole catacomb and a big dungeon crawl, or it could be as simple as there's a coffin in the basement of the cellar, and that's where this vampire lord lives. The guy who turned the paladin. Right. This one's very open ended on this end, but I want a nice boss fight if you decide to go after this guy. Or if you don't, you at least have stats for a vampire lord and can use them somewhere else. Right. That's the paladin. Pyromancer. So everything I think up to this point have had 4 omens, and the pyromancer is the one to deviate from that form and deviate in kind of a weird way. So it's the special. So the pyromancer, each form of the pyromancer is the same person echoed across time. Pyromancers can only die to fire. When one dies, all older pyromancers die. When Omen 3 is complete, reset to Omen 1 as the cycle continues unless the young or old pyromancer are dead. Okay. So this character, this denizen, is the same character 3 times as a young, mature, and old. So taking some of the elements of Mythic Bastionland of the 3 ages and spreading it across a character, in this case, kind of a Looper-esque. They're trying to kill a previous version of them or a different version from a different timeline. The echoes are weird, and this is an indication of that. So this one only has 3 omens, and it like the instructions indicate, there is a cycle here. So when you finish Omen 3, you go back to Omen 1. And again, all subject to the primacy of action. So if something happens where the young pyromancer dies in Omen 2, you don't repeat the cycle, obviously. But they have to die to fire, as the note indicates. So Omen 1, the old pyromancer wearily inquiries about the young pyromancer under the lie that she has stolen forbidden magic and must be punished. She teaches flame, which is a magic attack of fire, a d6 blast, and it does fire magic, to the first person who helps her. So this is kind of a fairy tale. The old crone approaches and wants to know a little bit of information. Do you help them out? What are they going to do with this information? Who knows? Who cares? If you have some more flippant players, because she'll offer to teach magic. And at the very bottom, you have the rules for fire magic, which when you do a d6, or actually any damage die, you roll that die once and you use the result both on the table and the damage that is being dealt. So there's a catastrophe that happens when you roll a 1, and it affects a bunch of random targets nearby, not just ones that you intend for. And if you roll a 2 or 3, the fire lingers and grows, and there's a chance that you may have just caused a huge explosion of fire as it continues to grow in size. And then on a 4+, the magic does what it's supposed to, and it doesn't get completely out of whack. If you're familiar with Scorn, there's some echoes of that here because we have magic with unintended consequences. And in this case, if you do poorly, then bad, lesser consequences fall from that. Omen number 2 has the young pyromancer tending a campfire and roasting a reptile. She is eager to help strangers with her fire magic and even show off. Her whimsy takes her elsewhere. So this is your first encounter with the young pyromancer. Do you find her charming? Do you not? Do you think roasting a reptile is weird? Let's get rid of her. That is something that can happen. And then Omen 3, is this kind of the standoff, the face-off. So the young, mature, and old pyromancers are in a clearing of ashes, and the mature pyromancer protects the young while giving her a chance to flee, and the old pyromancer sends her fire servant to pursue. So this is your fourth cast member, a fire servant, and we also have the mature pyromancer. They're all in this climactic battle. And what do the players do? I don't know. If you just sat there and you figured out and you did the rolling for what occurs and the players just sit by, that is something that can happen. If you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. In this case, I think the encounter itself is balanced a little towards the young and the mature who are working together to save the younger pyromancer. And I believe they have a better chance. But again, the dice will tell. The dice will tell, not me. And that's just the way that the encounter is set up. What happens after is up to you guys. Then in the flavor table, there is some future cycle distortions. So because you have only 3 points and they repeat, it can get kind of static in that way. And so this table will tell you how there are changes. So just because you go through it and it's a cycle doesn't mean it always stays the same. So things like in Omen 1, the mature tries to dissuade the old. So when you encounter the old pyromancer in Omen 1, there's an extra person. In this case, the mature pyromancer trying to talk her down from being envious and bitter and wanting to end the young pyromancer. Um, yeah, and then we have Omen 2 as a distortion in which the young distrusts everyone. The young pyromancer, instead of being eager to help strangers with fire magic and show off, is distrustful. So why did that happen? Who knows? It's a distortion. Perhaps the players will trace it back to the way they reacted to it the first time. Or maybe in Omen 3 they weren't helpful and they ran away instead. In which case, what happens then? So this one's fun for me because I could imagine a lot of different ways of this one going down, and I like the cyclical element. I'm not sure. This is just me thinking out loud. I'm not sure how many times people will go through the cycle before something happens, or if they'll even make it to a full rotation of the wheel of fire. It may happen that you have to reveal to players later, like, hey, actually, this was a cycle. And funny enough, if you did Omen 3 and you go back to 1, as long as the young or old pyromancer did not die to fire. Um, yeah, I think it's a fun one. It's a bit of a twist coming from someone who only knows the concept of Looper and has never actually seen it. All right, moving on. The Revenger. So if you thought maybe the pyromancer was a bit standoffish and it could be almost a non sequitur that you just encounter and you watch this kabuki theater happen in front of you, the Revenger is certainly the most non sequitur. This entire thing could happen in front of your eyes and with no intervention from you, and you could witness the drama that happens. But players wanting to get their hands dirty will likely find some point at which they poke something and take this railroad that they're watching, this train that's coming in front of them, and deviating it off course. So the Revenger, the false knight Corentus. The Revenger sits weaponless in a gibbet hanging from a dying tree. He laughs bitterly, promising poisonous vengeance against the lady who wronged him. She betrayed his affections for the love of another. All right, so this is our first encounter with the Revenger, and he seems angry. Cool. Omen number 2. The Maiden of Knots floats face down and dying in a pond. She has swallowed a poison that has stiffened her veins black and renders her speechless. She will die at the end of the phase. So, this is our second encounter, and this is the escalation. And one thing I find fun here is that there is an implication that the Revenger did this, but you can't tie it back directly. So if you have another myth that's going on at the same time, and there may be some way to implicate somebody else in the murder of this random girl, then the players will make that connection, and they may say, this is the ogre, or this is the work of the specter. I don't know. There are many different myths in which they could apply blame here, but if you're just reading the omens as we are, it's very obvious it's the Revenger who has done this. One thing fun too is that if you think back to Omen 1, in which he's trapped, the Revenger is stuck in essentially a cage hanging from a tree. Um, do the players free him? Did they? Did they maybe just give him his weapons and he broke free? Or maybe it wasn't even locked. Did they check? Who knows? In this case, it's clear from the evidence that he has found some way to escape, and she's this maid of Knots has paid the price for it. So I like the I like the kind of ambiguity that this situation presents. Omen 3, the Revenger is desperate and delirious and on the run. He offers poison to barter for food supplies. He will die in a day if his essential needs are still deprived. So this is a very clear, players, you have a choice here, because you can let this guy die, or maybe he uses his weapons that he's found and he decides to attack you. Um, this is up to the GM of how they play this out. There's also the flavor table, which tells you the look and effects of the poisons that he offers to trade. So some of them aren't just, you drink it, you die. There is things like you sleep for an age. There are thorns that grow from within, skin chars, right? Some pretty nasty poisons. But him being the Revenger, I wanted him to have something to do his dirty work with. And let's see what else. Something else that's fun to me is that Revenger is so bent on revenge that he doesn't have time to address his physical needs. He says, "Please, do you have food? I'll offer poison," because that's how the economy works here, I guess. And let's see. Fourth omen. The Revenger hangs from a rope in a blossoming tree. Flies rise like incense. The executioner stands nearby, watching his handiwork. His justice has been carried out. And so on the cast listing, we have the Revenger, the Maiden of Knots, and the Executioner, and it has their relationships kind of outlined there. So the Revenger was once beloved by the Maiden of Knots, and the seafaring noblewoman, Maiden of Knots, is in love with the Executioner, and the Executioner is the lover of the Maiden of Knots. Does he love her? We don't know. We just know that he's carrying out justice. And what justice is that? What is he doing justice for? It's all ambiguous. It's all left within there. Okay. Um, let's see. What else should we go to here? All right, let's move on to the patrician. So, just like we're watching this kind of drama unfold and have various points in which to interject or to make assertions of that we think we know what's happening, the patrician has a very clear track. He's a very clear decline. So, just like watching that train go by, you could also watch the train crash. And this has no shortage of crashing. So the patrician leads a caravan, and he talks to the company and chides them for their pauper circumstances. He gives them a statuette of a horse and delivers a quick maxim about hard work. Next time you encounter him, he is a less glorious caravan, as the horses that pull the wagons have gone missing. So in the cast list, we have the patrician, and we have a team of horses that have since left him. He also has his servants, and then in Omen 2, he also has a seer with him to help him find his missing horses. The company encounters the horses at the next monument. So I think this is fun because I wanted to tie some of these rules from the base game of Mythic Bastionland back into these omens, and to have some way for just to showcase particular elements here. So in this we have the landmarks being used for something other than landmarks. So this is the next time that they encounter a monument, there's also going to be a team of horses there. And then Omen 3, there is a less glorious caravan with exhausted servants and a seer. The wagons were left behind. So the next time you go to a hazard or you encounter a hazard, you'll see a wagon filled with carved statues, the patricians. And then finally, Omen 4, it's just the patrician by himself. He's frenzied and slowly transforming into a horse. His metamorphosis completes at dawn, and at the very end, this note here, after an age, the patrician reverts to his human form. So I wanted a character that has kind of a transformation. One of my favorite movies is The Emperor's New Groove, in which you have a nobleman who changes into a llama, or rather, an emperor. Emperor changes into a llama. This, we have a patrician, a nobleman type, who changes into a horse. What's fun about this is that what do you do with the horse? Do you just let it go? He'll change back into his human form, provided he doesn't die, or the players don't just take him as a horse and ride him around, and he gets all angry and such. Or do you help the horse? Maybe do you say like, okay, maybe we can just put him up at a good stable. He's not that bad of a guy. He's just very vain. Maybe we'll sell him off. It'll be funny. There's a lot of different reactions that you could do here, and I just love it's a very fairy tale kind of thing where you have a very high and mighty character tumble down like Nebuchadnezzar and become a beast of burden. Very fun. Pilgrim. The pilgrim is a fated character. Greets the company and asks for alms. She gives little not sacraments. No, there's sacraments that restore virtues along the way. So a stimulant, I guess, a sacrament, and a sustenance. So these are ways to recover your virtues. But I wanted a tactile way to integrate back into the original rules and to showcase these in this particular instance. So each time that the pilgrim sees the players, gives them a one of these ways to restore their virtues. So the pilgrim is on their way to a holy site, doesn't know the way, but isn't deterred. And the next time you encounter the pilgrim, they're finalizing their preparations and have two mercenaries with them. Omen 3 is the twist. You encounter just those mercenaries by themselves, and they shrug and refuse to answer any questions about the pilgrim. They're unconcerned. They offer their mercenary services for two valuable items. Uh, Something funny to me about this is that I was trying to come up with how do I have these characters offer their mercenary services and have a price associated with this? Because if you're familiar with Mythic Bastionland, there's no coinage used, and it's a lot of bartering and pledging services and whatever else. But I still wanted them to be mercenaries, so how do I do that? So I just had them say two valuable items, one for each of us. And if the players come up with that, then they have some mercenaries with them. We have two not very trustworthy people to go with them. All right. Omen 4, the twist. We encounter, well, I guess 3 is the twist, but 4 is kind of the resolution here. At the holy site, we find the pilgrim and is surrounded by 7 buzzard men facing outside of an impenetrable shield. So she is holding the shield and they're in concentration. Do you help her? Do you not? You as knights should probably protect the realm, and you could do something about this. But there's 7 of them, and they're actually kind of difficult. And I wanted them to be difficult. You're gonna have to find some interesting ways to get rid of these buzzard men. Um, Perhaps you scare them off. Who knows? They're buzzards. And the flavor table here is about the holy site. So when you come to visit, is it a waterfall of mud or a chromatic altar or a cairn of scrolls? A reference to Yohai Gall's cairn. Shout out there. And then the visitor. So who is there also at this holy site? We can have a skulking hound, or one of my favorite is you could have a traitor buzzard man. So one of the 7 has decided that actually, you know what? This pilgrim is worth saving, and they maybe turn on him. A clueless sellsword, or a dead seer, or perhaps a mercenary ambush. So the twin mercenaries that we encounter in Omen 3 or 2 and 3, perhaps they come back. Let's see. Hound and sellsword are 2 visitors on this holy site table. I also wanted to tie back to, like, with some of the rules and showcase rules that I've mentioned before. There are also stock characters and stock not monsters, animals that you have. And so sometimes I'll reference those and just say it's a hound. And then if you go back into Mythic Bastionland itself, you can find that there are the stats listed out there for, a hound, for a sellsword. Sometimes I just wanted to give some more use to some of these things, and then to also keep you looking at the rules, because there's actually a lot in there that you can use and be helpful in making these design decisions and these encounters interesting. Cool. That's the pilgrim. A fated character. Do you intervene? Do you not? Do you just witness this tragedy? If you play Dark Souls, there's a girl that essentially has this plot line where she goes down to the catacombs and she has two people that go with her, and one returns and says, "Oh yeah, I think she's okay." And then when you go down there, you find she's not okay. She's surrounded by a bunch of skeletons who don't attack her, but she's just in a very precarious situation, and she has two supposed friends with her that she has to that you have to fight off. Cool. Moving through. Last three. Let's go. The sword. Let's have a denizen that's not a person, and that is the sword. Okay, we'll just read through this one. The Omen 1. There's a trapper who has the sword and is giving it a few experimental practice swings. She claims a stranger bestowed it upon her and gives no details. She asks for directions to the seat of power. Okay, so it's just an initial setup. Person with a sword asking for directions. Cool. Number 2. The trapper and brigand stand on a small cliff in a heated argument over the sword. The brigand claims it was stolen from him by a strange knight in green armor. Another brigand lies dead here, slain by the sword. You can read as much as you want into this situation. The ambiguity makes it fun as a GM to say, I think it would be more interesting for it to be the brigand's lying. The brigand's claims. Is he telling the truth? We don't know. Even Omen 1, the trapper claims a stranger bestowed it upon her. Did she steal it? This is just her word. Are we really going to believe her? Just like the players, they have to uh, substantiate claims, and maybe they have nothing but their word. Do you take their word? It's very Arthurian to have to kind of defend yourself, more or less in a small court appeal, and you have to be the judge and jury of this whole shenaniganry. So this one you could encounter this. You can counter Omen 2, and you have a trapper and brigand fighting one another. And how do you react? Number 3, the Acid Knight, in green armor, astride his steed, wields the sword. And then Omen 4, the sword lies on the bank of a pond partially covered in dirt. The Acid Knight lies dead in the water, face up and bloated. A second character that has died in the pond. Which I guess is just a theme, or maybe I'm stuck on dying in like Ophelia dying in a pool of water. All right, so the sword is unnamed. If you look at the cast list, what's so special about this thing? It keeps passing from person to person. Only the wielder can hear the sword and gains the ambition to rule the seat of power. So it's a magic sword. It's a talking sword. It's a sword that you can listen to and take advice from. And it has the ambition to rule the seat of power, which is why that trapper character was asking for directions to the seat of power. How does this work in play? Does the sword actually take over a person's mind? Does it force them to go take the seat of power? Maybe. It just says they have the ambition to. They gain the ambition. Does that mean that this is overwhelming all other ambitions? Does this override their oath? Who knows? This is a bit of margin for you to play with here. I also like that it is a magic sword in that it talks to you, and it has a humming ruby hilt. It's just a normal longsword, and it's an introduction to the idea that the players could rule. And if they wield the sword and they talk to this sword that has this, entitled personality or protective personality with some quirky mannerism, then perhaps they can be ruler. And maybe this sword was the only nudge they needed to say, "You can do it." This one could be cut. This particular denizen could be cut short, really, at any point. If the knights encounter the trapper and they have the sword and they're swinging it experimentally and they bully them and they say, "Give us that sword. You're not worthy of that. That's a knight's sword." And they take it, and the trapper then leaves. You have no other omens to go off of. You have now taken the sword and we are running with it. And that's perfectly fine. This is designed to have to be able to jump off the railroad at these points. But again, you're witnessing the railroad. You're not on it. And it's evidenced by the reactions you can have to these things. Okay, so that's the sword. I wanted a magic sword, and I wanted to do it in a way that it talks to you. I think is quite fun as a personality kind of develops, and you can have somebody who is nudging you in a certain direction or tries to override your will because they're a very bitter sword and they want to get back at the seat of power because that's where they were to begin with and they've fallen from grace. Um, who knows? Cool, that's the sword. I like magic swords. I think a lot of fiction does, and I think magic swords are cool. The cursed. Okay, so I've just become a parent. I should let you know, because that plays into these next two myths in which we see parents and children, and myths, denizens. We see the interaction of parents and children, and we see just kind of tragic situations. So that's the only preface I'll give there. Um, Cursed is a young boy who emerges from the undergrowth on all fours. He asks for help hunting small game. He looks hungry and lacks a weapon. If in doubt, use a table below for procedure. So there's a small hunting game procedure, short little dealio. If you roll a die, and you can get everything from nothing to a scar and to some small game, and then or plenty of small game. It's a just a little ditty I wanted to add in there, some way to connect with this cursed child who wants to be your buddy. Need your help. Omen 2. Two harpies fly overhead and screech warnings of a terrible beast at night. One demands to be fed for their handy advice. So originally, I think I only had one harpy, and this harpy was going to watch over the cursed child, and I split it into three, so that became kind of a Sleeping Beauty motif where you have the three fairies. And so in this case, they are ugly things, because which is fair is foul and foul is fair, and so we have some foul fowls. And the cursed. Number 3, Omen 3. The cursed sleeps lightly in a large nest. He flees in a panic if approached. So now we've encountered this boy and they've been hungry, and now the next time we encounter them, they appear a bit different. They flee in a panic. So maybe we did this hunting mini game with them, and now there's a completely different reaction. But that's because the cursed reveals in Omen 4, when you encounter them for the fourth time, the cursed howls mid-transformation and splinters a tree, enters a rampage. The harpies follow from the skies, pleading he not be killed. So now there is an encounter where we see the cursed true form. And when you have the details and the flavor of the curse, they could be a dream panther or a four-armed gorilla or a burrowing giant rat with various traits and twists therein. They're also followed by a hazard and curse. So you choose or roll within your copy of Mythic Bastionland on the myth pages, and you can see what other effects are going on around the cursed child. What's this curse's origin? How do you deal with this curse? How do you break curses? These are questions not answered in here. These are play to find out. Can a seer give guidance, perhaps? Ah, yes. Now we're starting and we're integrating back into the base game proper. Omen 5 is the only one with 5 omens, but I wanted kind of a finish to here. So you've encountered the curse and the harpies a few times, and we can kind of see this interaction there. The harpies swoop in and implore the company to find a suitable home for the cursed. They want to be somewhere. They want somewhere essentially where he won't hurt anybody, but they can still care for him. So they want to raise the cursed in a loving nest, and they want to be nice despite having molting scabs and bloody gums. Yeah, this is a fun one. We have an interaction of mother and child. In this case, we have surrogate mothers, and we have a small cursed child, which has this transformation to them. I think the original influence was from an episode of Over the Garden Wall, in which we have a mother and child, and well, not really a mother. She calls her auntie Whispers. Is this character, and she's this really ugly. I think she's voiced by Tim Curry or something like that. This very large and imposing ugly beast. And so when they are encountered, the main characters of the show think that this this ugly auntie whispers is really the bad guy. When it turns out that it was the young girl that they've been interacting with, and that one of the characters falls a little bit in love with, and that's kind of the piece here, where we have a small child, and you want to be on their side because they're hungry, they need help, and it turns out they're actually the beast. There's the twist. All right. Pretty easy stuff to layer in your mythic tapestry. Giantess is our final denizen that we're going to go over. So the omens in order. The giantess paces distressed. She's looking for something sweet for her children to eat. She accepts anything in return, gives a gargantuan gold coin, enough to cover the expenses of a warband for a year. Chris doesn't make it easy when it comes to currency. So be it what gold shekels. What does he use in Into the Odd? He's got his own fantasy currency there, and then for Electric Bastionland, he uses the pound. Which, how am I supposed to deal with as an American? I have no idea. But he gives the yardstick of yardstick. He gives the yardstick of was it 1d6 pounds, gives a sandwich of varying quality. And then Mythic Bastionland, as I've already alluded to, with the pilgrim denizen, currency is kind of hard to deal with, and finding payment for something is kind of a fun problem to solve. So giving something that explicitly, according to the game, covers the expenses of a warband for a year is fun for me, because it gives the what this can cover, not really how much it's worth. There's nothing to tie this back to. There's no universal currency found within Mythic Bastionland, which is just fun. So if you're designing things, you have to find ways in which to convey value and to have a standard for value without being without resorting to gold coinage. So they cover the expenses of a warband for a year. Why did I say warband for a year? Because I think it's cool that this be the entrance to hiring a warband. And if you have something that explicitly says I can have an army with me, or a small army with me for a year, why not? Why not use it? And again, giving the players explicit permission to engage in that rule set. Because again, this is something I wanted for the denizens to do, is to highlight and to shine light on. There's some really cool things here in Mythic Bastionland. You just got to engage with these rules. Let's engage with the warband rules. Here's explicit permission to do it. Okay. Something else fun to me about Omen 1 is that the giantess accepts anything. She's looking for something sweet, but she accepts anything. So if you players wanted to do something goofy where you give her something that claims is sweet, she'll just take it. Again, it's just funny to me that she would do this, and giving you explicit permission to mess around and have a fun roleplay moment as a GM. Omen 2. The giantess asks for more sweets for her children, but this time you cannot do what you did before. She demands to taste the sweets before she is satisfied. In return, she gives enough jewels to cover the expenses of a warband for an age. Okay, I wanted to have a overly generous giantess. I wanted someone who would give a lot, and you'd maybe feel some sort of connection or obligation to, because of the twist that you'll see coming up. But I wanted another permission from the game to say, go buy a warband, have them for an age. It'll be cool. It'll be a lot of fun. Let's go do it. And again, it's a way to highlight specific rules found in the game. The giantess. Omen 3, here's the twist. So, like I've said, this comes from me being a parent now, and to, like, encountering parenthood. So the curse we're kind of seeing from the child's perspective. We see the child, and then we see the parents and the role of the parents. This one, we encountered the parent first, and now we're going to be seeing what the children get into at this point. So Omen 3, the giantess and her 2 children are besieged in an enclosure by a warband of mounted soldiers. Ooh, a very tense situation. Except the children have done something. Vess, one of the giant's children, ate a horse, and Willa ate a rider. They demand more sweets. Ah, yes, very Attack on Titan. We have some giants that have eaten some people crazy, crazy stuff. So then this becomes an interesting dilemma because what do you do now? You have some sort of obligation to the giantess, perhaps, or maybe you just call it even. You said, you know what, we gave we gave her what she wanted for what she gave us something in return. We've already done our deals. We owe each other nothing, and so this situation we're just gonna let play out, and we walk away. You can let the train go off the cliff. That is acceptable here. Or maybe not acceptable. It's permissible. The um the soldiers, the mounted soldiers, are also highlighted in the cast list, as are the giantess and the giant children. So they're all treated as warbands. I thought it'd be interesting to have an encounter that is between warbands in which you'd have to use your smite in order to engage with these guys at a tactical level. If you wanted to engage the royal herons, as they're called here, directly, or if you wanted to fight the giant children and say they need to be taken to justice, you can do that, and you engage with the warband rules. And so having a denizen with an explicit, this is a warband, these are warbands, they are fighting, means you have to use those rules, and let's highlight them, let's use them. Perhaps you could. I'm just thinking of this now. Perhaps you could even use the expenses, or sorry, the treasures that you've been given by the giantess to smooth this over. Hey, they only ate one horse and they only ate one rider. Perhaps we can come to some sort of arrangement here. Could we use the expenses? Sorry, can we use the jewels to cover your expenses for an age? Or perhaps could we hire you? Can we smooth this over? So I also highlighted the leader of the warband, Doldre, who is merely following rumors of threats and will not appear unfaithful to his troops. So he kind of has an obligation to make sure justice is followed through, that justice is obtained and carried out. But what does that mean? How are they going to deal with these children that have done this? I don't know. That's for you to find out. The giantess is inconsolable. Her children have split off and are terrorizing the realm. So essentially, if you left this in a standoff and you leave and go away, and perhaps you do some rolling behind the screen and you find out that the giant children survive, the royal herons are dead. This is where you go from there. Or this just happens, right? The giantess is inconsolable. Her children have split off and terrorizing the realm. The giantess has no reward to give. Ah, a clear deviation from the previous. But desperately wishes for their safe return. And then, if in doubt, you determine their location randomly using a D6 and D12 to determine their coordinates on the realm map. So, Omen 4. After Omen 4, the children become mature at the end of the season. So, tying in again the rules of Mythic Bastionland, the base edition, you're re-rolling their virtues, and in this case, also you're adding D8 maximum guard and a new weapon. So they get upgrades if you let the children go, or they don't learn their lesson. You know, if they're never told that this is wrong, this is bad, they explicitly in their characters have developing tastes for horses and humans, respectively. These two giant children, and then you have some bosses to fight. Then if you go after them, but there's nothing explicitly holding you to do so. Okay, and with that, it's kind of a lengthy. Is this an introduction, a review? Is this just me giving praise to the stuff I've been writing? It's just a design diary. So I wanted to talk through some of the things I found interesting in writing some of these denizens. Perhaps you thought of some ideas of your own, and you want to jot them down and share them, send them my way. I think it'd be a lot of fun. So this is up on Itch, and again, I've walked through pretty much everything in here. I've gone over. I've got on a 10,000 foot view for some of these details, but largely what I've read to you is what's going to be released. I hope to do more of these. Again, if you can't hear the excitement in my voice, I do find this quite fun to design for, and to use this Gustave Doré art and kind of do some imitation of Chris's layout style and limitations, right? So there's some very clear ways in which you engage with the cast and the omens, and the additional detail that you can give to flesh these things out, and introduce some ambiguity, so for the GMs to interpret some things but not completely abandon them. So if you found these denizens fun and interesting, go to the Dreaming Dragon Slayer blog at dreamingdragonslayer.com. Or if you want to read more about the story games foray that I've been taking, the story games sojourn.substack.com will take you there. And if you wanted to find this particular game, it is at dreamingdragonslayer.itch.io. And thanks for listening.